time and AM 630, Washington's Mall, WMAL.
Now, Washington Mornings on the Mall. 105.9 FM. And AM 630. WMAL.
7:37 on WMAL, where Washington comes to talk. Brian Wilson, Larry O'Connor will be back next week, taking some time to be with family. And our good friend Tori Clark is in the house today. Hello, Tori.
Hello, sir, and I'm so glad I'm here on Wednesday.
Yeah.
Because I will be smarter after this next segment.
You will be, because you're going to hear from the one and only KT McFarland, Fox News national security analyst and host of FoxNews.com's DEFCON 3 show. KT, how are you?
I'm just great. Thank you, guys.
All right.
All the better for talking to you.
Well, we got lots of stuff to ask you about. First, I guess I want to start with Susan Rice. The UN ambassador went on the talk shows. Everybody knows this by now. 5 talk shows and went over a series of things about the attack in Benghazi. Says that it was basically a protest that spiraled out of control, something that we knew very early on it clearly was not. Now there's talk that she might become the Secretary of State, and some senators, after meeting with her yesterday, said they got serious concerns. Senator John McCain, Senator Lindsey Graham, Kelly Ayotte, and others have said, and she's going to meet, by the way, today with Susan Collins and others, and they say, man, we're more opposed to her potential nomination before than now than we were before. What's going on here?
Well, I think that she didn't answer their questions, and if she couldn't answer them in closed-door meetings, a friendly meeting in their office, how's she going to answer those questions during her confirmation hearings? I mean, I think at the end of the day, President Obama isn't dumb enough to nominate her. Why? Because her confirmation hearings are going to turn into Watergate on Benghazi. They're going to be, who gave you those talking points, Ambassador Rice? What were you told? Why didn't you ask? Who did you talk to? Who altered those talking points? What did you read? Who in the White House told you to say this? And does she really want to answer those questions? No. Does the administration want her to answer those questions? Boy, that is like opening a can of worms. And so I think at the end of the day, the president probably won't nominate her for Secretary of State. Now, he'll give her something else. He'll say, gee, why don't you be NSC advisor? And then when all this stuff blows over, we'll nominate you for Secretary of State. I mean, that's how Henry Kissinger got to be Secretary of State. That's how Condoleezza Rice got to be Secretary of State. Why don't you do that? And I also think that to get her nomination passed, and I think it ultimately would, but he would have to use so much political capital. He's got to use that and save that political capital and use it for the tax fight, the QE3 fight,
right, but
the fiscal cliff fight. So why spend it there?
But I heard the president, he got his back up when this came up during the press conference. He said, hey, if you want to fight, then bring it on. Yeah,
well, macho man. Look, I think he had to do that in part because he knows that she does know the answer to those questions. And there's no point in alienating Ambassador Rice from the president's perspective. He's got to look like he's supporting her. But you know how these work. At the end of the day, somebody in the White House, the chief of staff, whoever, will call up Ambassador Rice and say, hey, look, Ambassador Rice, we really want to give you this. It's just not the right time. Will you withdraw your nomination? We'll give you a White House job that doesn't require confirmation. And then a year down the road, you'll get the next job.
I think you're absolutely right about this. And it's a version of throwing somebody under the bus when they are politically unhelpful to this administration, which they do pretty quickly to people. But I have a counter theory for both of you. And the counter theory is this. As long as people are focused on the largely insignificant tit-for-tat of what she said on the Sunday shows and who told her to say that and why didn't she say something else, they're not focused on the broader, more important issues of the issues and events and failed policies that led up to what happened in Libya on September 11th. We're not focused on disastrous policies in Syria. We're not focused on the fact that Al-Qaeda is spreading and metastasizing in many different parts of the world. So the larger narrative that the Obama administration wants out there, that the world is a more peaceful place because of them, in their eyes, remains largely intact. So I'm not so sure they're not happy about this fight and this spat with Susan Rice.
Right now, they're happy with it, and I completely agree with you. You know, when you ask about the whole cover-up, they lied. Look, they lied, and they covered up. But the question is not what did they do? It's why did they do it?
Exactly.
And they did it because they didn't want to have to address the issue that 5 days after President Obama bragged at the Democratic Convention, bin Laden is dead, the war on terror is over, Al-Qaeda's on its heels, we have the successful Al-Qaeda attack and a franchise attack on an American territory, which is what that consulate was, and the death of 5 Americans. They don't want to have that conversation because in 18 months, what's happened in the Middle East? It's gone from a relatively stable area of pro-American dictatorships, nonetheless, but pro-American, and 18 months later, chaos, anti-American governments, rise of the Muslim Brotherhood, of Salafists, of jihadists. And so tell me how that's a success.
Right. And I just think in a confirmation hearing, they'd rather have a fight over Sunday talk show, something completely inconsequential, than those broader questions.
And as long as you're at it, let's talk about women and African Americans and why Republicans don't like them.
Exactly.
You know.
Well,
So-
I think but I'll stand by my earlier prediction, which I made a couple weeks ago. She will not become Secretary of State, and if she is nominated, she will not be confirmed.
Okay, how about this for a conspiracy theory? Because we
keep
know
going,
that
yeah.
because I've lived in this town way too long, I do conspiracy theories well. John McCain and Lindsey Graham are big fans and have worked on many, many ways with John Kerry, and
Yeah.
he is who they would really like to see in there as Secretary of State.
Really?
Yes, absolutely.
Oh, sure. And this is in the British royal family, the expression is you always want an heir and a spare.
Yes.
Well, this is the heir and the spare. If Ambassador Rice doesn't measure up for whatever reason, the spare is standing by, ready to serve. I think wasn't that the expression he
Yes.
used when he went before the Democratic Convention?
Let me ask you on that question. Do you think that Kerry could be confirmed as Secretary of State, but I think he'd have a much more difficult time if he were nominated for Secretary of Defense?
Oh, I think senatorial courtesy requires that they would confirm one of their own. I mean, unless he was caught red-handed,
Well, I mean, remember those protests back in the day, and how that hurt his political campaign?
That's a war we ended up losing. So I'm not sure that anybody other than you and me are alive to remember that.
I almost.
But there's video.
No, I think Senator Kerry has had a pretty significant record in the Senate since that. And who wants to bring up, as we leave Afghanistan and are not having very good results in Iraq, who wants to have that conversation about Vietnam?
Right. All right, so, KT, you're a senator, and you're sitting up there when whoever the nominee is for Secretary of State is sitting at that chair, and you look down, what are the first two questions you want to ask that nominee?
Is Secretary of State or Defense?
Secretary of
State. Explain what the pivot to Asia means and how are you going to achieve that? And then I would ask, what are your plans for the Middle East? Is this a withdrawal, or are we staying the course?
There you go. Those are the kinds of things that we ought to be focused on now. Exactly what we ought to be focused on now. And again, this is too much of a conspiracy, but I do think that the current spat, oh my God, I cannot believe these Republicans are fussing over what she might have said on some Sunday shows. Who cares about that? And you can already see that line of attack coming from Jay Carney. I think it's a diversion they don't mind right now.
It's a smoke
And
screen.
also the argument that here's a bunch of old white guys
Yes.
grilling an African-American woman who was a Rhodes Scholar and went to Oxford. I mean, it's, the Republican Party has a lot of problems right now.
All right. Well, KT, thanks always for
And we'll
being
talk about those later.
Yeah, that's right, because we're out of time. And, the most important thing is making sure we get the traffic in. KT McFarland, Fox News national security analyst and host of FoxNews.com's DEFCON 3. Thanks a lot. It is 7:45.